Hello all and welcome to part one of our week 9 lecture. So today what I want to talk about is symmetry and mirroring. So basically the idea that I can affect change over here and it will change something over here on the model. So first I'm going to quickly show you what the new way is. I'm using the modeling toolkit that can be very effective, although I have not tested it with everything yet. Then I'm going to show you the old way, which is more complicated, but can also be very, very helpful. And then we'll go back to the new way and test it and see if we can't break it. So I'm just going to make a shape. It kind of doesn't matter what the shape is, as long as it's got a bunch of, let's see, subdivision height. There we go. We need some kind of resolution on here, right? We need some kind of material to work with. So right now, if I want to do something that's going to happen on both sides of this, I need to select this and then shift select that and hope I got it on the same level, and I did. And then I can extrude it from here, and I can use this tool, but it can still be it's a pain to switching around, and there's a lot of reasons why this can go wrong really easily. Let's make sure I did this. Yep. Always making sure I undid the extrude enough. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on symmetry. And it's one of the options that's over here. We've been kind of ignoring the top of this for right now. And so I set symmetry to, well, gee, which one do I use? Right now, object refers to the object. We haven't talked a lot about this yet, but there's object space and there's world space. So right now, object space has x-axis going in this direction. That is the axis I would like symmetry to go between. So basically you have to say, if this is my left and this is my right, what arrow is going in that direction? And that would be the x-axis. But do I want it to the object or to the world? Right? So if I, for example, rotate this, sorry, these are world based right now. Normally the pivot points are world based and not, here we go, object based. There we go. Don't actually change this on your settings. It means that it's impossible to move this according to the world. But that is the direction my object is pointing in. So now, if I was to choose symmetry, what would I need? Well, I would definitely need object symmetry, because world symmetry is going to chop it in half this way, and that doesn't make any sense at all. I can't think of a time when that would make any sense. So when we start off, object and world space are the same. The object is aligned with the world. The y-axis is this way, the x-axis is this way. As soon as you rotate anything, its object orientation is offset from the world. And that's going to become important later on with various things. But for right now, I'm going to double click on this tool and turn it back to world mode, because that is what we're used to working in, and there's a reason for that, so we're going to keep it there. And we're going to set symmetry to object X, and as long as, frankly, that should be fine as long as this is the direction I need symmetry in. So what happens is I go into face mode and I select a couple of faces over here, and you can see they select over there. And if I hover over something where I can see both sides at the same time, this happens. And if I hit extrude, I get a very different looking manipulator that lets me do this. And if I want to, I can then grab the move tool or the scale tool, right? And you can see the other side is mirroring it. So in some ways it is that simple. My reason for not showing this before was a few things. One, we had not learned all of the things and I wanted you to get some practice in. But the other is I have not tested this with all of the tools. So for example, I do know that it is okay to leave symmetry on, select an edge loop, and then bevel it. So far I have not seen that break anything. And you would think it might, right? Because, it's selecting both things at, both sides at the same time. But it is actually smart enough to realize the difference between selecting a whole edge loop and just selecting these two edges here. So that's good to know. But I want it to be that we have an understanding of geometry before we start doing fancy stuff like this, so that we can, if a problem occurs, we'll know it. That's a simpler way of doing things. The less simple way of doing things, I'm going to open a new file, so stand by. Alright, so new file open, and yes, the dreaded hammer makes its return. And so the reason I want to show the old way of doing this is because there are reasons to need to do it. So this is, I have two hammers in here. We can make one invisible in a second. But looking at this, you can see that there's two, prongs on the end of this. And I'm going to then turn that invisible. And that's what we want to do with this one. And when I had initially showed this in class, there was one coming off of here. I took it off, I repaired it, and then I look at it and I realize, well, oh dear, these edge loops are not the same, right? Something I did made a mess of this. So what I would want to do is unmess it up, right? So with this example, I want to show you how we can use mirroring, not just as the old way to get symmetry, but also just to fix a problem. And so this is a pretty typical problem. Now, in order to use the mirror function, which isn't as nice and easy as the symmetry function here, I need to be in an orthographic view, and I need this to be lined up along the center. Now, you can see from part of this here, because of the asymmetry, that middle line isn't always exactly where it should be. In some cases it is, and that is a thing we will deal with later. But for right now, you want it as close to the middle as possible. You want that middle line to be along the middle. And I'm going to actually turn on number 5 so I can see this, because I don't need to see through it. I actually need to not see through it. And I'm going to go into face mode. And I want to delete everything that's on this side. Now, in order to do that, it is tempting to go all the way to the line. Don't. Go only as far as you need to catch the faces that go to the line, and then hit delete. Because remember, we can delete faces pretty easily. So I only have to go just over the edge of these faces here, and it catches the whole thing. Obviously, because it is that's how faces work. I only need to hover over the very edge of this one, and it catches it and then goes to the edge. So we don't need to drag select all the way to the edge. If you do that, if you drag select all the way to here, you risk selecting stuff that's on the other side. I don't want to select stuff that's on the other side. I only want to select this stuff. Whoops. Gotta make sure we get the bottom. And before we actually mirror anything, I do want to just take a quick double check, make sure everything is clean. This is one of those functions where you want to just take a quick look and make sure there's no itty bitty faces hanging out there, because it's just easier to fix it now than fix it later. Alright, so I go into object mode now that I've cut this in half, and I go to edit, and this is a duplicate special. And I'm going to go to edit, reset settings, because I messed those all up from before. So first I'm going to show you just how to make the other half, how to make a copy. So the default is to set it to copy, and it groups it under this, although we can just say group it under the world because I don't want it to be grouped together. Number of copies, just one. We're not doing a picket fence or anything. And then the only thing I have to worry about is the scale. One of these scales has to be a -1. If I look down here, X is in this direction, so I'm going to put a little negative in front of the scale. And with this window still open, just in case I mess it up, I can hit apply. And I definitely did something wrong, because if I look at it, there's definitely, it's a very odd direction. That's not what should have happened. Very clearly it went across the wrong axis. So we're going to put that back to 1, And we're going to try again. There we go. So it made another copy. And now they're not attached yet. We got to fix that in a minute. But they are. Now the sides are identical, right? So now the back of this is symmetrical, and I can work with it however I want. But I'm going to delete that for a second. And I'm going to sit here and ponder for a good long while why on earth this thinks the negative goes under y. You do have to just kind of check it sometimes, but in all honesty, this confounds me because this is the axis. That's the x-axis. Stand by. Let's see if this is an object level thing. Oh, there it is. That's why. These are going off of the object, and this must have been rotated at some point. I must have modeled it from a different direction, and so this is the y direction for the object. See, object versus world gets you every time. This is why we're not afraid to just try it and see if it works and then undo it if it doesn't. But okay. How do we make it so that it's a mirror, though? Because you've probably heard people talk about mirroring one side to the other. So, it works like this. Instead of a copy, which makes a whole separate object, we make it an instance. And we talked about this if you watch the video on Duplicate Special with chain links and white picket fences and things like that. When you make an instance, the new thing is attached to the old thing. So I'm going to make sure. So this is called template hammer. I hit apply, and I made a new one. And it's called template hammer 1. I'm going to call it instance, right? So this is template hammer, this is the instance of template hammer. But if I look at it, I have these nodes. This is the transform node, right? So whatever I select, it says the name of the thing. Then I go over here and it says the name of the shape is instance shape. And I go over here and it's the same shape node. So what's happening is both of these have the same shape node and just two different transform nodes. So I can move them away from each other. I can go like this and it works out fine. But if I change the shape of one of these, see how it's selecting? It changes the shape of the other one. And this is what the old school mirroring did. It's even harder to pronounce. It made it so that if I selected one thing, the other one changed with it, and you could easily keep things symmetrical until you needed to sew them back up. I wanted to show you this because it is important to know how to mirror things in case you need to repair them, like I was doing here. But also just in case you're trying to do something and the symmetry in the modeling toolkit is not working. Like I said, I do not have a lot of experience with it, so I basically haven't wrecked it yet, right? I haven't tested it enough to see what breaks it. And there's not much that can break this because they literally are the same shape node. All right, I'm going to delete that instance. Go back over here, and we're going to do a legit duplicate special this time. We're going to call it copy -1. All these settings can be the same. Hit duplicate special. So we've got two halves that match each other, but we need to make them part of the same whole. So you'll remember, this is also acting as a review of things we haven't done in a while. If we select this and go to the modeling toolkit, we can say combine. Now suddenly they both select at the same time. That's step 1, right? So we need to combine two different meshes into the same mesh. And then what we next need to do is merge some vertexes. So if I look at this model, nothing's too close, except for the ones that are in the center. So right now there is a seam in the center. Remember, going to combine does not JK. Oh, ha! I have symmetry turned on. I don't want symmetry turned on, thank you. Not right now. So right now there's a seam going down along the middle. We definitely don't want that. So I am going to drag select the whole thing. Edit mesh, merge. Now for the most part, that should have merged a lot of the vertexes. Yep. So for most of this, that should have just fixed the problem, gotten along great. However, there will be a couple spaces where it didn't. For example, I know it didn't right here, and I don't even need to run any tests. I can see, let me select these so I can focus in on them. I can see that it didn't work here. This is the kind of thing you need to be able to just like look at and see. And the problem goes at least down to there. So I gotta, okay, it starts here. So what to do? Well, honestly, sometimes brute force is the easiest way. I go to target weld, and I say center. Normally, target weld drags A over to B. But in this case, these things are separated by the same distance from the center. Oh, why did that? Oh, ha. I have something selected, and I don't want it selected. Stand by. Click off. There we go. Target weld. And it is a little bit tedious, but such is life, because this is a lot easier and a lot more exact than trying to fix. I'll test if that one's broken in a second. Right, this is much better than trying to fix the symmetry that was wrong before, in part because this will be exact when it's done. Right, so merging these things, yeah, there's a lot of them I'd have to merge, but this is exact. Right, I made mirror copies of something, and then I'm using the target weld to reattach them. That's going to be an exact outcome. An exact outcome is worth the effort, I think. Just speaking personally. Oh, there we go. Huge differences. Now, eep. If I want to test if something got merged correctly, I can do this. And I know there's a couple places where it was hard to tell if they were merged or not. But another thing I can do is I can hit 3 on the keyboard, and I can take a look, and I can see if any holes opened up. So if I'm going to undo some of the things that I just did, some of the seam attachments that I just did, and kind of makes the double lines a little bit more, ooh, there we go. Right? That's no good. So if I want to redo things, redo control Y, oh, I can't because I messed up. I did something that's not redoable, right? But that is the general idea. So I'm going to pause for 1 second to like actually fix my model and make sure it's going to work for the other thing we're going to do, and I'll be right back. Alright, so I finished sewing it up, and it didn't actually take very long, and you can see now, instead of that weirdness I was getting before, these patterns look correct. They match the where the edge loops go. And so I'm going to hit 1 on the keyboard to get back what it's supposed to look like. There we go. So now to see if we can wreck the symmetry a little bit. Probably not, because I promised that most things can get wrecked, but there you have it. Now, because I know this is oriented strangely to the world, I'm actually going to say symmetry world X, because we know that this was rotated, and I just don't remember how. So there you go. There's a reason to use the world instead of the object. And in order to get the these things out here, the first thing I actually want to do is add another edge loop. And I'm going to add another edge loop because we can see if I bring these two faces out on both sides, there's not going to be any room in the middle, and I actually want there to be. So I'm going to go to Mesh Tools, insert edge loop, and I'm going to put it pretty close to here. There we go. That'll give us a little bit of a gully to work with in the center. And now I go into face mode. I changed my tool because I had the insert edge loop tool on. And I think I'm going to select going to use Q for selection. I don't remember what I did before, but I'll do it like this now. It's not the flattest surface to work with, I'm noticing, so I'm going to have to do probably a little bit of correction, but we're going to say extrude. And we can see that both sides are extruding out. I can use the scale tool. I'm using the scale in this direction to flatten these out, to make them flush. So I didn't really extrude very much this way. Shrink it a little bit and bring it in, but mostly I just wanted to, you can see how the if you go into vertex mode, this vertex is behind this one, and like it's not even. So I kind of used this scale trick to even it out. And when I go back into face mode, my faces are still selected. So now that that's done, I'm going to scale them a little bit this way too. Move them up. Yep. But I can extrude it again. And now I can pull this out a little bit further. I can scale them substantially this way, but I move them up because we're bringing the bottom up more than we're bringing the top down. And I can go kind of far. I think something I said on a lot of wheels was, that's asking a lot of that one polygon. That was the thing I said a few times. So I'm going to follow my own advice and not have this underneath polygon stretch too much at once. Okay. Extrude again. Shrinking this. Because we're bringing the bottom up faster than the top down, that might mean we need a few more steps, because this can stay smooth, and then this, again, we're having it do a lot. Oh, ha! This happens sometimes when you forget to consider the other side. If we wanted to smooth out this a little bit, we could go into vertex mode. Not scale it, that's for sure. Kind of alter this a little bit, because I definitely forgot, or I kind of forgot to shrink this way. So I'm going into edge mode, and you see I'm going faces, vertex, edges. I'm changing what mode I'm in depending on what I need to move. That's normal. There we go. It's not, you're not going to be working in all the same modes all the time. One mode isn't going to get you exactly what you need for everything. I'm also going into vertex mode a little bit to fix this edge loop before it gets any more screwy. We don't want it so close to one side. We want to have it kind of walking the middle a little bit better. There we go. That's a little better. All right, and you can see it's doing it to both sides right there, so that's making it easier. And I'm not going to do the whole thing. I'm not going to waste your time with me doing the whole thing, but that is how this process works. And so far, I don't think I've broken the symmetry, so that's good to see. And I could easily actually go in here if I didn't want this polygon to do so much work. I can bring this up, right? So because I want to bring the whole bottom up, I'm in edge mode. There we go. If I want to fix this edge loop, if I think the loop isn't in the right spot, I go into vertex mode. And I know that sounds weird. If I need to fix the edge loop, I go into vertex mode? Yes. Because that's how you can directly affect the path of the edge loop. Right? If I want to affect these faces, I need to go into edge mode, because grabbing the side of an edge will affect more of the face. If I want to affect an edge, I need to go into vertex mode. It's kind of like derivatives in math. If you want to get one thing, you have to go the next step down to get the other. And you can see I even in real life, even if I wasn't at the end of a video, I would not go any further until I reshaped this, because it's easier to reshape things now, round this out a little bit, get the edge loops better, than to wait until I have the whole thing. If I turn on this again. Okay, and I look over here. There's very few steps in here. But even with that, like, I could start adding in edge loops to smooth it out, but there's a lot already in there, and changing it would be rather difficult. Whereas with this one, I can make the changes, make this the shape I want now, before going any further. Kind of round it, fix it a little bit, and then drag out the rest of the pieces. All right, so that is the difference between the mirroring mode, which is the old mode, and symmetry, which, again, I would have to eventually remember to turn this off. That's one thing we want to remember to do at the right time. Otherwise, we might mess ourselves up. But yeah, so if you're using symmetry mode, just make sure you're paying attention to your model. Make sure that nothing is, going askew. And if it does, make sure you're kind of saving often and saving as often. So I haven't saved yet, but one thing I can do is I can say save scene as, and I can call it mirroring 2. Put it in the right folder. And then what happens is I have two different versions. I have the one I started at 10:46 a.m. and the other I started at 11:31 a.m. So that gives me a living history of my file. It gives me a living history of what I'm working on and allows me to walk backwards in case I really, really break something. And that can also cover your butt in a way that the undo cannot.